When we think of early human survival, we often picture primal battles against monstrous beasts, saber-toothed cats, giant bears, and the unforgiving Ice Age wilderness. But what if the deadliest predator our ancestors faced wasn't a wild animal, but another human? Long before Homo sapiens ruled the planet alone, we shared it with powerful human cousins like Homo heidelbergensis. Tall, muscular, intelligent, and armed with advanced tools. They hunted big game, controlled fire, and spread across continents. But shocking archaeological evidence suggests they may have done something even more chilling: hunted their own kind. From crushed skulls and butchered bones to burn marks and weapon-inflicted trauma, patterns of violence point to a species that may have turned survival into domination, not just over nature, but over fellow humans. In this video, we uncover the dark legacy of Homo heidelbergensis, a predator in our own image, and explore what their brutal history reveals about the origins of violence, power, and the human condition itself. Chapter 1. Predators in our own image. When we picture our early ancestors navigating the brutal landscapes of prehistory, we imagine them as survivors, dodging giant predators, braving freezing nights, and battling nature itself for every breath. But hidden beneath this primal struggle lies a darker truth, one far more unsettling. The possibility that the most dangerous enemy our ancestors faced was not nature, but each other. Long before Homo sapiens became Earth's dominant species, the planet was a shared stage, populated by multiple human lineages. Among them was Homo heidelbergensis, a towering, robust species that emerged around 700,000 years ago and spread across Africa, Europe, and Asia. They were not primitive brutes, but sophisticated, intelligent beings who used fire, crafted tools, and hunted cooperatively. With brain sizes approaching our own and bodies built for endurance and strength, they were apex predators in their own right, contending with saber-toothed cats, giant hyenas, cave lions, and other Ice Age terrors. But recent archaeological discoveries suggest that their dominance may have extended beyond hunting animals. Across several prehistoric sites, most notably the eerie depths of Sima de los Huesos in northern Spain, researchers have uncovered signs of something far more sinister. Skulls shattered by blunt force, bones stripped of flesh, burn marks and cut marks made not by accident or scavengers but by intelligent hands. The remains of at least 28 individuals were deliberately deposited in the depths of a pit, many showing signs of violent deaths. One skull, cranium 17, bears two near-identical fractures to the front of the skull, strongly suggesting intentional killing. In Ethiopia's Middle Awash Valley, the Bodo cranium, 600,000 years old, shows deep, systematic cut marks made by stone tools, concentrated around muscle attachment areas, indicating flesh was carefully removed. These are not the chaotic remnants of animal attacks or post-mortem decay. They tell a consistent story of conflict, of butchery, and perhaps of cannibalism. Some might argue that desperate times, famine, resource scarcity could explain such acts. But the frequency, location, and deliberate nature of these injuries suggest something more chilling. A pattern of violence not driven purely by survival, but by intent. Homo heidelbergensis may have seen rival human groups not only as competition, but as prey. They lived through one of the most volatile climatic eras in Earth's history, with ice ages transforming lush lands into frozen wastelands, and droughts tearing through once thriving African ecosystems. As resources became scarce, water, meat, safe shelter, the stakes for survival escalated. And in that crucible of desperation, it appears heidelbergensis evolved not just as hunters of game, but as hunters of humans. The implications are profound. If these early humans routinely turned weapons on each other, it suggests that the roots of warfare, murder, and conquest run far deeper than the rise of civilizations. This wasn't symbolic violence, nor isolated murder. It may have been systematic. The discovery of Excalibur, a finely crafted pink quartzite hand axe buried with the dead in Sima de los Huesos, hints at the complexity of their social and perhaps spiritual lives. Was it a tribute, a weapon of execution, a ritualistic offering? We don't yet know. But what is clear is that these were not mindless savages. They were thinking, feeling beings capable of both compassion and cruelty, in other words, deeply human. This chapter of our past forces us to confront uncomfortable questions about who we are and where we come from. If heidelbergensis truly hunted their own kind, then the echoes of violence we see today, in war, in betrayal, in the darkest corners of humanity, are not new. They are ancient. In the bones left behind, we see not just the birth of a predator, but the reflection of ourselves. Chapter 2. Bones, Blood, and Silent Testimonies. Beneath the layers of soil and stone that blanket prehistoric landscapes lie silent witnesses to the lives and deaths of ancient humans, and Homo heidelbergensis left behind a trail of unsettling clues. The fossil record doesn't merely whisper of violence, it screams it. Across continents and centuries, bones have surfaced, bearing marks that paint a story of calculated brutality. At Sima de los Huesos, in the Atapuerca mountains of Spain, over 7,000 human bones representing at least 28 individuals were uncovered deep within a cave, deposited with eerie deliberateness. These weren't accidental burials or the aftermath of a natural disaster. The bodies appear to have been dragged or lowered into the pit, their skeletons showing signs of trauma, especially skulls like cranium 17, fractured with such precision that they could only be the result of purposeful killing, likely face to face. The injuries are not from predators or post-mortem damage, they're peri-mortem, inflicted at or near the time of death. One of the most mysterious elements is the presence of Excalibur, a beautifully crafted quartzite hand axe found among the remains. While some interpret it as a primitive grave offering, others suspect it could be a murder weapon or even a symbol of execution, suggesting a complexity in social behavior and violence that transcends instinct. Thousands of miles away in Ethiopia, the Bodo cranium tells a parallel tale. With deep, systematic cut marks around muscle attachment sites, the skull reveals an individual who was not only killed, but deliberately defleshed. These were not random acts of desecration. The cut marks align with known butchering patterns used on animals, suggesting that flesh was removed efficiently and purposefully, possibly as part of a mortuary practice, but just as possibly as an act of cannibalism. And this isn't an isolated incident. From Kenya to France, a broader pattern of human bones with tool-inflicted marks, trauma, and burn damage begins to emerge. One tibia from Kenya, dated to 1.45 million years ago, shows clear signs of flesh removal, potentially representing one of the earliest known cases of cannibalism among hominins. While we often attribute such behavior to ritual or starvation, many of these sites show no clear signs of famine. Instead, they seem to suggest a far more deliberate form of violence, organized, repeated, and perhaps even socially accepted. And it wasn't just the dead who bore these marks. Some individuals show signs of healed trauma, skulls that had once been cracked and later recovered, suggesting survivors of violent encounters, possibly ambushes or raids. This paints a vivid picture of a world where interpersonal and intergroup conflict wasn't rare, but woven into the fabric of survival. In this brutal Pleistocene theatre, territories mattered. Water sources, game trails, and shelter weren't just resources. They were reasons for war. Groups of heidelbergensis likely encountered one another while migrating or hunting, and when they did, the results may have been bloody. Their mastery of tools, the Schöningen spears, hafted stone-tipped javelins, and heavy wooden clubs, gave them the capability not only to hunt large game, but to dominate and perhaps eliminate competing human bands. It's easy to romanticize prehistoric humans as noble savages, living in harmony with nature, but the evidence pushes us to confront something colder. That these early humans were capable of care and cooperation within their own groups, while unleashing calculated violence upon others. And this duality, the ability to nurture and destroy, may not have begun with civilization, but with the species that preceded us. The remains from Sima de los Huesos and Bodo don't just represent death, they represent decisions. Someone chose to swing a weapon. Someone decided to scrape flesh from bone. Someone stood at the edge of a dark pit and pushed or dragged the bodies in. These acts required planning, intent, and perhaps a grim sense of justification. Whether these were punishments, executions, acts of conquest, or rituals, we may never know. But what is certain is that the story written in the bones of Homo heidelbergensis is not one of peace, but of a species straddling the line between survival and savagery. A species intelligent enough to make fire and tools, yet violent enough to turn them on their own kind. Chapter 3. Fire, Tools, and the Birth of Human Nature. To truly understand Homo heidelbergensis is to witness the moment humanity began to step out of nature's shadow, not just as an animal shaped by the environment, but as a force capable of reshaping it. This species didn't merely survive the harsh chaos of the Pleistocene, it adapted, innovated, and altered the world around it with precision, intelligence, and ambition. They lived in tight-knit social groups, possibly between 15 to 30 individuals, moving with the seasons, returning to the same sites, sharing knowledge, tools, food, and responsibilities. Fossil evidence from Sima de los Huesos and Boxgrove in the UK reveals individuals who had suffered serious injuries or disabilities, but were cared for over extended periods, pointing to a level of empathy and social bonding rare in the animal kingdom. These weren't just hunters, they were caregivers, collaborators, and perhaps storytellers. But that same intelligence that enabled care also enabled control, manipulation, and violence. Their toolkits speak volumes. Finely crafted wooden spears like those found at Schöningen, Germany, dating back 300,000 years, demonstrate an advanced understanding of aerodynamics, balance, and woodcraft. These weren't crude sticks. They were precision weapons designed for distance kills, likely used in coordinated hunts and possibly in group conflicts. Stone-tipped projectiles and hafted javelins from Ethiopia, dated to 279,000 years ago, show further complexity. Hafting, a process requiring the combination of stone, wood, binding materials like sinew or resin, and technical skill, was not just about tool making, but about foresight and planning. It required passing down knowledge, observing results, and refining methods, traits that lie at the root of culture itself. And it didn't stop with stone and wood. At Olorgesailie and Olduvai Gorge, shaped bone tools over 1.5 million years old suggest early humans, including heidelbergensis, were experimenting with all available materials, crafting tools not just for hunting but for butchering, digging, scraping, and defending. These weren't instinctual actions, they were chosen strategies. In their hands, the environment became a resource to be bent, reshaped, and weaponized. But those same tools that brought down megafauna like bison or steppe mammoths could just as easily be turned against rival humans. Fossils bearing weapon-like trauma, particularly blunt force to the skull and sharp cuts to vital areas, show that violence wasn't an occasional byproduct of conflict. It may have been central to their way of life. Yet, in the midst of all this, there are glimpses of something profoundly human. The deliberate placement of bodies in deep caves like Sima de los Huesos, potentially with symbolic objects like the Excalibur hand axe, hints at the beginnings of spiritual thought, or at least a sense of the dead as more than refuse. Whether this was ritual, respect, fear, or practicality remains debated, but the cognitive leap required to conceptualize death and act on that concept is a milestone on the path to modern humanity. Likewise, anatomical studies of the hyoid bone and cranial base in Homo heidelbergensis suggest they may have had the physical capacity for speech, and if they had speech, even at a proto-linguistic level, they had the power to share ideas, issue commands, pass on strategies, and form abstract concepts. Language, if it existed, would have been their greatest weapon, allowing for unity in times of danger and division in times of scarcity. With language came planning, trust, betrayal, and cooperation, everything that still defines us today. Territorial behavior likely became inevitable. As populations grew and spread into overlapping resource zones, conflict between groups would have increased. Patterns of repeated settlement at water sources or rich hunting grounds imply that certain groups may have established dominance over areas, defending them against outsiders. In such a world, a well-thrown spear or sharpened axe wasn't just a tool, it was a message. You're not welcome here. Yet even in conflict there was continuity. These humans forged the foundations of what we now call society. Division of labor, shared goals, group loyalty, emotional bonds, and moral codes enforced through cooperation or punishment. Perhaps they had rules. Perhaps they had outcasts. Perhaps the trauma we see in their skeletons, fractures from blows that mirror modern executions, were acts of justice, vengeance, or warning. Homo heidelbergensis was not a creature of pure instinct. They were something more. A species standing at the threshold between ape and human, between nature and culture, between impulse and ideology. They are not just our ancestors. They are our reflection in an ancient mirror, showing us that the human story has never been simple. It has always been a story of contrasts, love and hate, care and cruelty, innovation and destruction. They were the first to live in a world not just of survival, but of meaning, memory, and morality. And in that sense, the fire they lit wasn't just for warmth or protection, it was a spark of the human condition itself.